Okay, here we are with the Used Companion magazine, and this one's July 23rd of 1891, and this is a beautiful cover picture for the magazine. Okay, these magazines were only 5 cents back then. Okay, interesting picture, horse-drawn wagon. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, and because it is 123 years old, the pages are rather delicate. Here we go to the first one here, and we're going to read to you, Is the Earth Round? Okay, how many of you have always questioned that? You know, and wonder why, you know, people on the other side, they ought to fall down. So anyhow, here's the story of Is the Earth Round? And it's read to you by Jennifer.
Persistence is an excellent quality, but lifelong adherence to a grave error, in spite of all logic, is a very great mistake. There lately died in England a man whose life well illustrated Dr. Johnson's lines descriptive of a mistaken author's work. The Englishman's name was John Hampden, and he spent his life in endeavoring to prove that Copernicus, Newton, and all the men of science who came after them were wrong, and that the earth is flat and not round. Hampden was a man of some wealth, and consequently could indulge himself not only in the publication of endless pamphlets, but in the luxury of much time spent in writing to the newspapers letters directed against the inconceivable error that the world is now in as to the size and shape of the earth. Hundreds of long communications from him on this subject found their way to the waste-baskets of the newspapers, but he was not to be discouraged by their failure to appear in print. It was impossible for the Times, the Daily News, or any other leading newspaper to make a casual reference to the globe without precipitating a long letter to the editor from Mr. Hampden, which generally began in this way: Dear Sir, an article which you published this morning contains a word which implies an assumption that the portion of the universe which we inhabit has a spherical form. This was no doubt an inadvertent error, but as others may be misled by it, I venture to explain in a few words why the world cannot be considered round. Then he went on with a long explanation of his theories. Though the newspapers were seldom printed his letters, and his pamphlets had very few readers, Mr. Hampden found ways to bring himself and his theories to public attention. He once offered to the wager £500 sterling that he could prove that the earth was a flat surface by the following experiment. He proposed that upon a straight stretch of the Bedford Canal, 3 vessels should be moored in a straight line at intervals of a mile. All 3 vessels were to have main masts of exactly the same height. Hampden assumed that if this was done, a telescope placed at the same level as the tops of the 3 masts could not distinguish that the middle mast was any higher than the other 2. The wager was taken, and the experiment actually made, and it was found that the top of the mast of the middle vessel was nearly 8 inches higher than the masts of the other 2 vessels. Hampden refused to pay the wager, and the matter was brought into court, where he was compelled to pay the £500. But he was as far as ever from being convinced, and declared himself a martyr to the stupidity and prejudice of the rest of the world. When confronted with the fact that the earth had actually been circumnavigated, Hampden maintained that all the circumnavigators had simply been sailing around a given point. He published the immense map on which he represented the North Pole as a point on a central plane, with the known regions of the Earth radiating from it, and ending in a vast Antarctic region entirely surrounded the known Earth. Of course, such a map must represent points in the southern hemisphere at a most prodigious distance from one another. But Mr. Hampton was not deterred by the difficulty. All his reasons were satisfactory to himself, and no proof could convince him of his error.
All right, so there's a little bit of knowledge, and I guess you still have to figure out, as the world did, is the Earth round? They found all that out in later years. And there you go. But this was the beginning of asking that question. All right. Be sure to sub me. Join me as a friend. Bye-bye.